didn't really began in Korea. It's began when I was living in Europe. So when I was living in Korea, I was not really interested in this because I used to think Western art is more superior. So um, I went to Europe to study more or less Western art. And one day suddenly came up to my mind, you know, I don't really know my own personal roots. So um, it just, after I studied, Western art, and I did all kinds of oil painting and acrylic and all sorts of Western drawing, materials I was tackling. And so I went back to Korea, and then I opened my eye. I looked at totally with different eye. So I got interested in calligraphy and painting, and that's how my journey began, more or less. So
Did you grow up with an artistic background as a child? Were you an
I
artist before Europe?
yeah, I originally, when I was a child, I wanted to go to art school, but my parents said, no, you can't make a living. So I had to have some practical job. So I became a nurse. And then I went to Germany. And while I was nursing, I also my secret mission was kind of study art over there. But so I was kind of half day working and a half day studying art. So that's more or less uh, you know, so I turned around and eventually, gradually, uh, so I found myself as an artist. Never, that was my child dream. But those days, I grew up basically during the, um, I was born during the Korean War and grew up in a very, kind of country was not easy situation. So but I could go Europe as a nurse. So that's one reason I decided to go nursing school. So I did about 10-year nursing, and then I gave up my job, and I, went to other way. So
Wow.
anyhow, so that's my little story.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And then talk about, so how long have you been teaching for now?
I've been teaching this brush painting in the beginning when I came to New York. I was looking for a teacher here because by then I was studying already for 10 years in England, as well as I had a Chinese teacher in England, and then back to Korea, and then I had Korean teachers. So, um, but when I came to America because of my husband's job, uh, I couldn't find the right teacher, and then Long Island is more tricky unless you live in New York City. So, so I ended up volunteering myself to a local community. I would like to share it. So, kind of local art, art council. I was volunteering, and that's what took me off. Never imagined I would do this as a kind of career or anything at that time. That was 26 years ago.
So you have
But
some experience, it sounds like.
yeah, but in the meantime, I've been basically teaching this art form for 25 years. I've been sharing, but so just I followed my own heart. So never imagined that, but I really love it, and I just fell in love with it. Yeah.
So how do you approach students? I think some people, when they see, Chinese brush painting or Asian brush painting, especially Westerners, they get intimidated because
Mhm.
they think they need to maybe speak the language or
Mhm.
understand Asian calligraphy. You have to, like, what are yours typically with your students who don't have any, they typically don't have any experience with that?
Oh yeah, because since I came to this country, most of my students were more or less American. So I was the way I studied on the Chinese and Korean masters. eh, was, I couldn't, teach it the way I learned. So I had to figure it out somehow, my own way to adapt Western mind.
Hmm.
So, so kind of, for example, in East, we study one stroke at a time. For example, my teacher made me to do one orchid stroke, because usually you study four gentlemen first. It means four gracious plant, which means bamboo, orchid, chrysanthemum, and plum blossom. Those are the foundation strokes. So usually you study one topic for 6 to 1 year, and that's how you lay your ground. But I couldn't teach to my American student that way, and I tried, but it didn't work. They were running away. Okay, so I had to, I had to figure out, I had to figure out what, because it's some very often they don't, they don't, they were so how Asian orchid look like, some also the plum blossom tree is not exactly, so I had to choose the topic which they can relate to, so most likely, I was looking into like, rather than, that particular exact topic, bamboo, you see it here, but I had to find some kind of that noble plant. I mean, those four topics are regarded as a noble plant. So those, there is a reason, because of symbolic reasons and the meaning of it, not only just how they look and gives you the foundation as well, but I had to find some kind of cousin family, but which look like it, but it carries a similar stroke idea.
Hmm.
And and we study one after another, you can find it. And even orchid is, for example, like a beach grass. It looks similar to that. So that's how I, gradually, I move very quickly forward and then have to rejuggle. And you say I had to find a way, depending on the students, how patient they are. So eventually I figured that out. And uh,
Wonderful.
yeah.
So we've invited you today and you're going to do a demo for us. And I can switch to your camera.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me find your camera.
Yeah, I'm curious about your background. I mean, how
Oh,
many did you ever painted this? I mean, did you ever use this kind of brushes, or I'm just
so you know,
curious.
I myself, I am not. I'm a very novice artist. I do have some. I personally have some experience with Asian art. I lived in Hong Kong for 6 years.
Okay.
And my daughter went to a school to learn Mandarin, and she was learning the brush strokes with with the Chinese brush. So I
Okay.
have some sense of it.
Mhm.
But in terms of painting traditional Asian art, no, I don't. But I'm a huge fan of it.
How about today's the participant? I mean, are they
We
familiar with this, or a totally new beginner?
I'm looking at the crowd. I think we have a good mix. I think we have some artists who definitely who take some Asian art classes
Okay.
with us. And if anyone, I don't know if you can give a thumbs up if you've taken classes or you're
Yeah.
brand new. Yeah. So I would say half or maybe
Oh,
have done it before.
okay. All right. So, so that's fine. I mean, traditionally, um, as I mentioned to you, this four gracious plant, known as a four gentlemen, but nowadays, not only gentlemen painters, women and children are painting. So I like to call it for noble plant, or a gracious plant.
So
So those are, so I mean, my book describes a little bit summary of it. So basically, as I mentioned to you, people spend traditionally in Asian country, they study calligraphy first and then move on to painting. But actually, painting and it's calligraphy is actually same name, just, I mean, it's just called different, but it's, you can learn from each other. If a good calligrapher can learn very quickly painting, and good painters, Asian brush painter can learn the calligraphy. So same situation. So this is the poor gentleman basic idea. It's an orchid. And for example, if in this country, I would do maybe like, daintily or irises, and you could make it equivalent with this. And then bamboo, and then plum is the, you know, um, it's any tree foundation, if you want to do some magnolia or any other trees, around. So if you learn this, basically you can learn all kinds of trees. If you are interested in the other flowers, like any roses or any peony or anything, if you really know how to paint a chrysanthemum, you lay that foundation, this one. So that's the situation. So I was wondering today, my traditional school, when I went to a first time, a brush painting school, I had to do one line. He made me to do one line for whole months. I was not ready. I used to go his studio every day, but can you imagine? I had to do one line for whole months, and then he made me to do further after that. So, but there is nobody in this country who are willing to do that. So, so anyhow, so today I'm just going to introduce this daily strokes, which is more orchid stroke. It's I call it cousin. Okay, orchid's cousin. So daily looks like this. Okay, so I'm sure in California you have this too.
Is it a daylily, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Town
something very
lily or
similar.
daylily. It's
Yes.
or iris. Are you more familiar with the iris?
I would say both. We have definitely both.
Okay, all right. So, I mean, once you do this, you can also do tiger lily. Tiger lily has a different structure. Basically, the brush painting, you need to study the structure first. Okay, so in order to do in order to do a good brush painting, you really need to know the structure. So traditional school, probably most masters make you to do outlining technique first. So then you free yourself eventually. So now I'm just going to show you, give you some idea of how the brush painting works. Okay, so first is the loading. Brush painting is basically combination, between loading and the brush strokes. And at the same time, you need to, control how much water you have, wetness, and then how much pressure you have, and then how quickly you do. The speed is something to do. So basically, pressure, water amount, and then the speed, and those are subtle, combinations. That's how you train yourself. And so those three elements is basically the main element of brush painting. So I'm going to load, basically, you load the color which comes the last first. Okay, so for example, if I want the yellow come out the last, so opposite way of thinking. Okay, and then now whole brush is yellow, okay, very light. And then I'm going to put a little bit of like that, like more kind of reddish tone in the tip. Yeah, even, it's chrysanthemum will do the too, it's this way. So you have, and then you take it off like this. So if you take it off like this, you basically taking off all your colors. So you have to do it this way, okay? So total beginner, you have to remember that. Okay, and then I'm going to do further in a tip, darker tone. Okay, more deeper tone. So my brush has this basically, so this is how you load. So your brush has this situation. You see that? Dark tone, deeper tone, and the middle tone, and then this yellowish, okay? So basically, according to, okay, I'm just going to show you different topics idea. Okay, so if this is a daily, then this basically looks like this, okay? So you have one stroke here, and then you have another stroke here, and then you make one petal, okay? So then basically tip is used up, so you have to reload your tip, only the tip, okay? And then here you go, here, another one there, and then this, and then you, so then I'm retouching the tip again. So 95% you load the darkest tone in a tip. That's the brush painter's loading look like, okay? And then here, you can also go, occasionally you can do outside to inside, okay, like this. So they really has about, I think it's a 6 petal. So here we are. So you have another one there, and this, and then you can add this. So that you have this main flower established now, and then go. And then, usually always, tip. So if you want to add some another color, it's just a bud expression of the bud. So I'm going to go there right there, and then choose, make your, so bud expression is somewhere there. And then you go another one there. Okay, and then you show your colleagues there. And then this orchids, the leaves, this daily leaves works this way, okay? So basically, you can do black and white, but you can also do with a color. I guess you prefer with a color. So I have basically another way to load is, so most cases, 90% cases, you load darker tone in a tip, but this time I'm loading it one side, this green, other side, a little blue, and then other side, I'm making a little bit of this tone, and I'm even going to add a tiny bit of dark ink one side too, so I have a lot of color. You can even do this if you are interested. So you can even add another color if you want, kind of maybe blue or even another green. You can add a color like this, see? So that's possible. You can paint your brush and then you can do 2 ways, okay? So basically this leaves can be, usually the orchid leaves are down to up, press and then lift and press and then lift, okay? You get this stroke. You can do it that way, or you can do top to down. So top, top, and then you turn it around, and then you come down. And then you can do top, top here, and then down. Or you can go, okay, so you can go down, basically down here, and then go. And then you hook it up, the stalks to here. So then you go inside thing. The stem. We are going to add this here a little bit. That's the stem. So one thing you can do is this thing. So this is optional. If you want to add a little more detail or a little more accent, then this can be done that way. So this is very optional. Okay, so go here. You can add a little texture like this. I would do this half dry and half wet, so it kind of blends it.
Sungsook, are you using rice paper?
Yes, this is a, the single shore.
And
Single
what kind is it? And that's just basic. Oh, sorry.
rice paper has, in broad sense, a 3 different kind of type. One is raw and then semi-size. It's good to have like a landscape. And then the size paper is good for fine line style. Okay, so basically this is raw paper. That's where the beginners should start. So
And what kind of paint is that? Just regular watercolor paint?
this is what I have is actually Japanese watercolor. Asian watercolor has actually more gum in it. So when you do okay, I need to go maybe this way. I have to add another one there. So Asian watercolor has more gum in it. When you want to mount it, then it doesn't it's bleed less compared to Western watercolor. So brush painters tend to prefer Asian watercolor, but you can use Western watercolor too. If you use the fixative when you mount it, as you know, this rice paper is so thin, you can't really frame it as it is. So you have to mount it, meaning you use another thicker rice paper, slightly, fiber in it, rice paper. You glue it together and then stretch it. It's called the mounting. And I prefer wet mounting. That's a traditional way of doing it. I usually, teach the advanced students for that. And then you can frame it. And it becomes like, it reaches thickness. So it becomes very stretched. Um, for example, it looks like this. So
By the way, as she stepped away, I put a link into the
So
chat.
once mounted, so you can see it's, you see the white paper is underneath is the mounting paper. I stretched it. If it's a larger size paper painting, then I recommend twice, but this is one time. It's just a relatively small size painting, so you see, then you are ready with this one to frame it. You see, this is a one time. You can also do, you know, I would say this side, I would do it one more. So another layering of the paper, and then it reaches certain thickness. It lasts, stretch the for quite a long time. So that's this style of work. You need to mount it. I mean, I'm sure that in Bay Area you have some people, some stores, they can do it for you. But I usually teach my students, because it's unless you go city, it's difficult to find it sometimes.
Yes. I actually, Nat, can you show us more of your work? I'm fascinated by this.
Okay, so this is, for example,
by the way, while she's pulling some things, what I meant to say before is that in the chat, I put a link that's for register interest. So we actually have a new registration system that people are able to kind of show that they're interested in the class. And if we get enough interest, we would set the class up, or we would take those emails and let you know when we do set the class up. It's free and easy to do. I put the link in the chat. Anyway, sorry, Sungsook. What were you saying?
you see the daily, I did that in a front. And then if you want to do the background, for example, I did this one, I splashed it more like, abstract expressionist element. Usually, if it is a total dry, you can do it front, but you can also do backside like this. And then you do this splash idea, and gives you some, a background, it feels more finished. So it's totally, you don't have to do it. You can do it just like that. Um, this is, this is some of the work, it is relatively small, but these are more abstract. Uh, you see, the way I run the class is I actually start with a more, some clear images like that. And then I move on to more semi-abstract and an abstract stage, meaning bringing more abstract expressionist element. And then, meaning you paint more from memory eventually. So you discovering your inner self in a way. And, so that's usually takes less time, but you need to start from more concrete images first. So that's, and or some cases I also teach how to do, more minimalistic. In other words, the Asian brush painting concept is a painting an idea. So it's not, they are not interested, the representational or external characters. I mean, external appearance. They are more interested in how to capture your topic's kind of character or personality. So that's what you are interested to express. So usually it takes time to really do a good work. But sometimes you have some, some happy accident too. Okay.
And tell me about, when did you publish your book?
Oh yeah, this actually book, it was a totally surprise because about 4 years ago, because I've been teaching in a city about more than 15 years, maybe 17 years. And this publisher suddenly called me up and she asked me to write a book. So so she was following more or less my style of work, and she thought, oh, your work seems to be more up to date of brush painting. So I ended up, introducing what I've been doing, like painting New York City and, city scenery, as well as, where I live in Long Island. I live in a very countryside near the water. So I have I have some beach scenes as well. Or sometimes so I included all kinds of scenes, including um, this the abstraction, how I came to this abstraction idea. I mean, brush painting has a semi-abstract element in originally. As you know, this art form was originally regarded as a literati art form. So usually the calligraphers, the government bureaucrat were used to do that as a kind of amateur spirit. But my abstraction was involved because this musician came to me when they saw my work. They asked me to cooperate some joint project. So they asked me to paint their music. So how do you express their music? So I ended up naturally, I explored it for a year, listening their music. So I ended up creating more abstraction. So I could connect it with the the music and this painting, brush painting. So I just felt end of the day, and then I naturally came to, using more larger brushes. Like, I use very abstract paintings. I use really big brushes like this. Sometimes I use sticks. I use all this kind of stuff,
Oh,
and
wow.
even Western brushes. I use a kind of so I try to use, this kind of Western fan brush or Western watercolor brushes, things like that. So I was working when I was doing this abstraction element. I was working on large scale, and then using all this, and the musician was, I did all kinds of experiment. Um, Live music as well as just listening to music. I always actually paint when I'm doing it while I'm listening to music. Really, to me, uh, after have that experience, I felt like, what's the difference between me doing music with a brush? I felt very much like I'm a musician too, but I'm only doing music with a brush. So what's the difference? So I ended up changing my artist statement since then. So that, this young sixth musician chamber group asked me to do a joint project. That was about 15 years ago. So I explored quite a lot since then. And I connected with from a real starting some point and then turn to a kind of the
Well,
ideas.
I love the evolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah, so we called it as a jointly we called it Brush Boys, and that we performed it actually. They were when they were doing music on the concert hall, my brush painting was popped out, each, different music tone and my different brush strokes. It came out and it was actually so beautiful experience.
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you show me? I saw you flipping through your book. You said you've done cityscapes.
Oh yeah. So basically, because these are some of so this book is basically describing more or less my personal journey, where I started and where I am now. So this
Oh,
is
wow.
it's like a New York City, um, cityscape. So, and then it's all over. Because, so this is in England, Oxford. We used to live there for 6 years. So this is when I was living in Oxford. Actually, I used to take a watercolor class there. And then one day I decided to take, we were visiting different colleges, painting college campus, but I decided to take my own medium, like a brush painting medium, but painted, Oxford scenery. And suddenly it made so much sense. I should do that exactly. So from that time, I really explored I used this traditional stroke and capturing the wherever I go. So I ended up, so I have a huge amount of um, this kind of, so I usually carry this kind of, this is not, yeah. So I usually carry this kind of screen book. So when I travel, I take one or two, and then you can,
Oh, wow.
you can do your visual diary. So
Oh, that's
I
so
ended up
beautiful.
collecting last 20 years about, whatever. So this is when I took my students to China, Yellow Mountain. So we were there only 2 3 days. And so we've been painting, Yellow Mountain. And it was so dreamlike.
Oh, this is so stunning. Do you
Yeah.
make your own books?
Huh?
Do you make your own
Yeah,
books?
yeah,
You
yeah.
make
You make your own book. I ended up collecting so much, and then this one is just showing basically how you study. I made my own book for my students, so this is just a teaching tool how you know, um, where they should explore and then move on to where they begin and move on to I ended up creating many books like that in different topics. So I'm showing the process how I do it. So then move on to including, this is more traditional concept with including adding some poetry or calligraphy and things like that. So if you study, for example, the plum blossom, you need to start from here and then move on. And where do you begin with the basic simple branches, and then you move on, 2 stroke, 3 stroke. So just a step-by-step idea, so they understand, where they need to begin if you really want to be grounded, and then move on. So I have huge amount of book like this. I used it in classroom. Yeah.
so beautiful. Well, I'm gonna get your face back on so we can all see your face. Hold on.
Okay.
And then if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah.
Or if you're shy, you could put it into the chat and I can ask. One question that we did have earlier was, do you still paint in the Western tradition? It sounds like you're blending it.
You know, uh, I I've been doing, because so many places ask me to teach, so I've been so busy with my class activity. I really don't have time to kind of dealing with the Western material that extent, because I still carry it. I occasionally use it. I used to do pastel, watercolor, and acrylic, even some printmaking and pottery. I try explode everything, but whatever I do, I'm sure that my style right now is kind of East-West blend.
I
So
love. I mean,
I've been,
no, I think your landscapes and your cityscapes are so interesting to me because I hardly see cityscapes in that style.
yeah.
So it's so cool.
Yeah. So, end of the day, it doesn't matter what topic you do, you just use the foundation. What makes it brush painting? So the my I feel this brush painting, I have to bring it. You can study, obviously, you have to study tradition, you learn the vocabulary, but you need to apply that in your own situation, so your own personal journey. So that's my, you know,
One question is, how similar is Chinese brushwork to watercolor painting?
to Western watercolor.
Yeah.
So I would say it's a main element of Eastern brush painting is they incorporating the space, the empty space. More I paint, personally, I've been doing this almost 40 years. More I paint, that negative spaces, to me, it's more important than where you leave the space. We call breathing space. So started balancing between the different empty space, um, you know, so those elements of the negative space is really the one of the key element, as well as brush strokes. So how to control this brush is actually, it looks, this is such a flexible brush, compared to, look at this Western brush, the fan brush stays a fan shape, whereas this brush, it can turn to a fan brush, it can turn to a very thin, brush. You can do tiny little strokes with this if you use a tip of it. And then you can use sometimes here, sometimes there. So this is such a flexible brush. So I think some scholars said Asian brush is the most flexible brush, and then your combination with the thinnest paper, exists. It's such a sensitive. So to me, brush painting is this Asian sensibility is reflected.
Hmm.
So you're basically like learning how to use the chopstick. So this brush is really knows you where you are, and I can immediately tell, you know, you know, where you are, and how you can free yourself.
Hmm.
I mean, to me, the freedom, most beautiful painting to me right now is most spontaneous painting.